Hello everyone, welcome to Lucid Mains. Today we are going to discuss the Afghan Conundrum. Afghanistan is passing through testing times at the moment. The Afghan government controls barely half the country, with 1/6 under a resurgent Taliban. More severe is the ongoing depletion in the Afghan security forces because of casualties, desertions, and a growing reluctance to join US-led forces. It was in such a scenario that Russia hosted an informal meeting in Moscow on Afghanistan in which all regional stakeholders were invited, including the Taliban. Now, we have gone through a brief overview of the problem or scenario in Afghanistan. Now, let's get into the finer details of the issue. The US's 17-year war in Afghanistan. Following the 2001 invasion of Afghanistan, USA has actively engaged itself in Afghanistan. They have been training Afghan forces as well as assisting in the reconstruction of Afghanistan and in establishing democracy in Afghanistan. After being elected in 2008, President Obama ordered a full-scale review of the US's Afghan policy. Even though he announced an anti-insurgency troop surge, in December 2014, he announced that the US Operation Enduring Freedom has formally ended and handing over primary responsibility for combat operations to the Afghan security forces, even as the insurgency gained ground. The US realized that it had run out of options as insurgency could not be contained as long as sanctuaries existed in Pakistan. The US had already lost 2,300 soldiers and spent a whopping $105 billion in rebuilding Afghanistan. So, the war weariness demanded an exit and a political solution was unavoidable. These factors must have propelled the Obama administration to announce a troop withdrawal. However, the Trump regime has reversed this, at least for the moment. President Trump believes that if US withdraws now, the vacuum could be filled by Taliban as well as other powers like China and Russia. So, the Trump administration has decided to deploy an additional 4,000 soldiers to train Afghan forces. The Trump regime has also taken a policy as to not to announce a date for US withdrawal as it would give the insurgents time to wait out. The new Trump policy seems to have a realistic perspective which understands that it is not easy to defeat an insurgency which has safe havens. Following this, the Trump regime has warned Pakistan to stop providing safe havens to terrorists unless it wants US to use its heft to achieve this goal. To buttress this new strategy, Trump should also not rock the boat with Iran. That is, Iran being a stakeholder in Afghan stability needs to be taken into confidence. As far as India is concerned, the Trump administration from its inception has envisioned a larger role for India in Afghanistan. The recent exemptions given to India from the US sanctions regarding Chabahar port and associated railway line shows the importance of India in US designs. At the same time, the US officials have conveyed messages to Taliban political representatives in Qatar, urging the group to join talks with Afghan government. So now, as we have gone through the American plans regarding Afghanistan, let's see what the Russians bring into the picture. Afghanistan is fast emerging as a theater for strategic balancing as various powers jockey for influence and equilibrium while a new great game gets underway. The US 2014 drawdown left a power vacuum in the volatile region, which was increasingly being filled by China with its bait of Belt and Road Initiative. The US's plummeting relationship with Pakistan exacerbated the situation. As a mean to counter the expanding Chinese influence, the US sought to leverage its growing proximity with India. This drew Russia, the other major player in the region, into the fray, and Russia has injected an altogether new dynamic to the shifting calculus. Russia, with its geographical position, could position itself as a stabilizing force in Afghanistan. It has elevated its diplomatic stature by pursuing peace-building efforts through multilateral conferences and reviving the Shanghai Cooperation Organization contact group on Afghanistan. It also tried to bring the Taliban to the negotiating table and sought to rebrand itself as a noble investor investing in Afghanistan's infrastructure, transport, mining sector as well as in Afghanistan's peace. Following this new approach, Russia had called a meeting in Moscow on Afghanistan and invited almost all the stakeholders, including Afghanistan, China, India, Iran, Pakistan, the US, the Central Asian countries like Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and the Taliban as well. Afghanistan in this meeting was represented by its High Peace Council, and India sent a non-official envoy comprising of two former diplomats, Amar Sinha and TCA Raghavan. India's representation was limited to this non-official envoy because India has always maintained that any peace process regarding Afghanistan must be led by Afghan, owned by Afghan, and controlled by Afghan. Now let's see what the Chinese interests are in Afghanistan. China saw the US withdrawal from Afghanistan as an opportunity to assert itself there and also to enhance its position as a regional heavyweight. Control in Afghanistan will help China to cement its Belt and Road Initiative as well as its China-Pakistan economic corridor. Pakistan has in fact midwifed secret Chinese contact with the Taliban as well. China also has other worries based on its fears that its Muslim Uyghur community, which is being treated brutally by China, could cross the border, seek shelter in Afghanistan and threaten Beijing's internal security. So these are the Chinese interests in Afghanistan. Now let's see what sort of a game Pakistan is playing in Afghanistan. It is common knowledge that Pakistan was behind the creation of Taliban. However, international politics made Pakistan an ally of USA in its fight against Taliban and Al-Qaeda. But it seems that Pakistan has been playing a double game in this. They received huge amount of US aid but doesn't seem to have taken concrete measures to counter the Taliban menace. However, it has to be admitted that they too have had losses in the hands of Taliban. But Pakistan's proxy war against India and its dependence on Islamic hardliners as well as the political might of Pakistan army has restricted the scope of its actions. And now with Imran Khan's ascent to power in Pakistan, who is referred to as Taliban Khan for his contacts with Taliban, it is clear than ever before that the Pakistan army's hardcore Islamists are going to call the shots in Afghanistan. Establishing a Taliban-dominated setup in Afghanistan is going to remain their highest priority. Pakistan is getting emboldened by the fact that every external power that matters to them, that is the US, the European Union, Russia, China and Iran, are quite reconciled to accommodating the Taliban. In accordance with this strategy, Pakistan recently released a founding member of the Taliban, Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar. Taliban has welcomed this and he could play a major role in talks with Taliban. Now let's see what sort of a relationship exists between India and Afghanistan. The India-Afghanistan relation is a unique and dynamic one which dates back 1,000 years. India has invested in institution and infrastructure building in Afghanistan that won a lot of trust among the people of Afghanistan. The India-led projects in Afghanistan includes the India-Afghan Friendship Dam, which is also known as Salma Dam, the Doshi Charikar Power Substation, the Store Palace, Afghan Parliament, Shahtoot Dam and Drinking Water Project, etc. Apart from the above mentioned initiatives, India's assistance to Indira Gandhi Institute for Child Health, established in 1970 in Afghanistan, is now 200,000 US dollars per annum. And Afghanistan is the largest recipient of 1,000 scholarships provided by the Indian Council for Cultural Relations. On top of all these, India also gives training to Afghanistan defense personnel in India's military academies. The Strategic Partnership Agreement of 2011, which is also known by the short form SPA, has further mechanized greater integration between Afghanistan and India over the years. Working under the Strategic Partnership Agreement has paved the way for development over the years. One such instance is the air connectivity program between Afghanistan and India. Now, as we have mentioned the Strategic Partnership Agreement, let's see what the SPA framework brings in. Under the SPA framework, the Joint Working Group on Development Cooperation functions in 4 committees, namely Political and Security Cooperation, Trade and Economic Cooperation, Capacity Development and Cooperation, Social, Cultural, Civil Society and People-to-People Relations. So, under these frameworks, the SPA helps in creating more proactive relationship between India and Afghanistan. Now let's see what are the recent developments in Indo-Afghan relations. India-Afghanistan Air Corridor, which was agreed upon during the Heart of Asia Summit in Amritsar in December 2016, has been hit by a shortage of cargo planes. This is a cause for concern. India's Chabahar port in Iran and the trilateral agreement to develop transit trade also need close attention. There has not been sufficient follow-through on the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India gas pipeline, that is the Tapi gas pipeline, after its inauguration in 2015. Eventually, it has to be understood that India's dealings with both Afghanistan and Iran are not just about circumventing Pakistan. They should open up important new connectivity and commerce avenues as well as develop markets in Central Asia and through them to Russia and Europe. Now, since we mentioned Heart of Asia Summit, let's see what it is. The Heart of Asia Istanbul process was established to provide a platform to discuss regional issues, particularly encouraging security, political and economic cooperation among Afghanistan and its neighbors. Now let's see what India as a stabilizing force in Afghanistan brings to the fray. India is a major player in the Afghanistan game. India's importance becomes clear from the fact that both US and Russia views India as a key component in their Afghan designs. This is evident from the exemptions given to India by the US concerning the Iran sanctions as well as by the Russian invitation to India to attend the recently concluded Moscow informal meeting on Afghanistan. However, Taliban and Pakistan are not sympathetic to Indian involvement in Afghanistan. Taliban remembers that it was India which supported the Northern Alliance as an opposition to Taliban during the Taliban reign. Since we have mentioned the Northern Alliance, let's see what it was. The Afghan Northern Alliance, officially known as the United Islamic Front for the Salvation of Afghanistan, was a united military front that came to formation in late 1996 after the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, or in other words Taliban, took over Kabul. The United Front was assembled by key leaders of the Islamic State of Afghanistan, particularly President Burhanuddin Rabbani, and former Defense Minister Ahmad Shah Massoud. Initially, it included mostly Tajiks, but by 2000, leaders of other ethnic groups had joined the Northern Alliance. This included Abdul Rashid Dostum, Muhammad Muhaqiq, Abdul Qadir, Asif Mohseni, and others. The Northern Alliance fought a defensive war against the Taliban government. They received support from Iran, Russia, Turkey, India, Tajikistan, and others, while the Taliban were backed by Al Qaeda. Now, let's see what the current scenario is in Afghanistan. Afghanistan has now become the playground of various powers trying to balance each other's geopolitical clout. The US realized that Afghan reconstruction will be a futile exercise unless the Taliban is brought to the drawing table. Thus, after prolonged negotiations, a Taliban office was opened in Doha in June 2013 to promote talks and a peace process. However, when the Taliban office started flying the Taliban flag, calling itself the Political Bureau of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, situation worsened. After coming to power in 2014, the Afghan President Ashraf Ghani moved to improve relations with Pakistan. However, this too got derailed. A new initiative, Quadrilateral Coordination Group involving the US, China, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, was launched in 2016. However, peace hopes were dashed when Taliban demanded exit of foreign troops, release of detainees from Guantanamo, and removal of leaders from international blacklist. And apart from these, there were signs that the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan and the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan were converging in Afghanistan's eastern and northern provinces. So following this, the Afghan President Ghani launched the Kabul Process for Peace and Security Cooperation and made an unconditional dialogue offer to the Taliban. However, Taliban rejected this, declaring that they were ready to engage in direct talks only with the Americans. Further, the US and Russia-led negotiations, which we have mentioned earlier, has an element of competition in it. This raises the question as whether it would really solve Afghanistan's causes. And more than all these problems, the Taliban's insistence that it remains the real government in Afghanistan derails all the peace processes which is being negotiated to bring about a lasting peace in Afghanistan. However, having said all these grey areas, there is something to cheer about in Afghanistan. The recent parliamentary elections revealed the resilience of Afghan people and showed that there is still hope. An estimated 4 million voters comprising around 33% of the electorate turned out to vote, braving Taliban threats. There was a significant turnout of women voters, that is around 30% of those women who registered. Nothing shames the Taliban and their medieval practices regarding women more than this large turnout of women voters. So, it has to be said that there is still hope for democracy in Afghanistan. But the people of Afghanistan need all the support it could get to defeat the hardliners and to cement the democratic process in Afghanistan. Now let's see what India's stance is regarding the ongoing Afghan peace processes. India has always maintained that it will only participate in those summits or meetings about Afghanistan which are Afghan-led, Afghan-owned and Afghan-controlled. That's why India's participation in the recent Moscow meeting was at the informal level. However, India needs to have a pragmatic approach here. She needs to understand the ground realities. As said earlier, About one-sixth of Afghanistan is under direct control of Taliban. A US Ombudsman report cites that the government control is restricted to just more than 50% of Afghanistan. So, it is a reality that Taliban is in the upward surge in Afghanistan. So, considering this, like the US and Russia, China too is keen to coordinate with India on Afghanistan, as reflected at the Wuhan Informal Summit between Indian PM Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping. India will actually do well to appoint a special envoy to the region comprising Central Asia, Pakistan, Afghanistan and the Gulf region for a holistic approach. Pragmatism dictates that India remain engaged with multiple processes underway. Peace does remain elusive, but India's engagement demonstrates commitment to the idea of a stable, independent and peaceful Afghanistan. So that's all for today. I hope everyone got a picture about the Afghan Conundrum, and let's wait and watch what these developments will transform into. Thank you.